quite popular because, yeah, everyone's afraid of dementia, right? It's becoming a very scary thing. And especially if you're a witness to it, right? If you've got experience observing it, it is a nasty thing to observe. And it looks like Western medicine doesn't have much of a clue about what's going on. Chinese medicine has a better understanding. Of course, the treatment isn't that great, I would say, because once it's onset, it's really hard to pull it back. You can't really pull it back once you started kind of going down the path. So our best treatment is really preventative measures, lifestyle measures. That's the best treatment. And that reminds me, there's a quote, Chinese medicine quote, something like, the inferior doctor treats a disease when it's already there, and a superior doctor treats the lifestyle before the disease comes. So Chinese medicine is really into this idea of lifestyle medicine. And they don't even call it medicine, they just call it lifestyle, right? We call it kind of preventative, it's like, it's almost out of fear. Oh, I'll do it so I don't get it. It has its, of course, do it. But, if you're doing things out of fear, that's also can be problematic, which we'll talk about in a moment. But rather to do things because it feels natural, it feels healthy, it feels good. So choosing lifestyles that feel natural, that feel healthy, that's ideal. Okay, so I'll just give you a quick overview of like what to expect and the structure I'll do today. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is just like the Western definition. We have to define what is dementia and what is Alzheimer's. Then once we've got the Western stuff covered, then it's easy to move into the Chinese. So we'll talk about the Chinese understanding of the brain and dementia, and what organ system is contributing to it. Right? And then after that, we'll talk about treatments or preventative measures, but also treatments. Once it's kind of onsetting, what can you do? I'll just double check. Yeah. Cool. And what I'll do is I'll start moving through the information, and then as we towards the end, we'll do more questions. Okay. So just a quick bit of an intro about my exposure to it. So my auntie, my father's sister, died of dementia a few years ago, and it was a quick deterioration because she had early signs of dementia. So there's 3 stages. She got early dementia, so signs, and then the doctors found something else in her system, like a tumor or something, and then they treated it. They treated it with their treatment, and then it destroyed her system, destroyed her organs, and basically it's put her into severe dementia very quickly, and then she deteriorated. So she had it for like 2 or 3 years, and which is quite fast. And then she died of extreme dementia, and it really rattled my father. And I've never seen my father rattled like that. So, because he knew her very well, and he saw her at the end, and he was just so rattled by it. So I was like, wow, this is hardcore. So yeah, so that really got me more interested in it, or more like wanting to understand how does it come on, what are the treatment options, and then the more I've been looking into it, the more it's important to share this information, particularly Chinese medicine. And of course, we'll talk about EFT as well. Like, what can you do with EFT that fits into all this? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start moving through. Also, if you've got questions throughout it, that's fine too. You could send me a chat. That's probably the easiest one, just so that I can check on that as I'm flowing through, and then later on we can open it up a bit more. So I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, but first I'll show you something cool. Can you guys see this? This old Chinese guy? Yeah. So this is a Qigong master, and in this image, he's about 70, 80 years old. And I just want to show you how he moves and stuff. So check this out. So super flexy, super flowing, right? Not much stiffness. How many 70, 80-year-olds do you know can move like that, right? And so he went on to live to 118 years old. And I wanted to show you this partly because we have very sort of it's kind of a belief about what aging looks like. And part of aging actually comes from the belief. You know, if you believe something enough, oh, when I reach 60, I'm going to get this. When I'm 70, this is going to happen to me. You know, once you kind of enforce that belief, it's very likely it's going to happen. So this guy, 118 years old, he's 80 in this video. And also in Taoism, and a lot of the old Chinese views, one way to look at it is they saw a human life as being 120 years old. So that was normal. That's the lifespan, 120. So when you're 80, you still got 40 years to go, right? That's a long time. And this is like pretty good cognitive, this is good movement, including, right? So in the West, you know, we're like 70, 80s kind of it, but it's possible to live to 120. And of course, there's this whole new field now of longevity, and the scientists are getting fanatical on it. And that's also probably going to blow us out to about at least 120, I think. And children and people that are born today will probably live to 100, maybe longer. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, today, nourishing the brain. Excuse me, I'll just change this. Yeah. So we're going to talk about TCM and EFT, strategies for dementia and Alzheimer's. So health disclaimer, this is not to replace advice by a medical doctor or preferred health professional. Okay, good. So what is dementia? Dementia is really an umbrella term, and it's associated with any sort of neurodegenerative disorders. So it's basically a loss in cognitive function, memories, thinking, those sorts of things, you know, putting things together. And so it's an umbrella term, just like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is kind of an umbrella term. It's not genetic. So dementia in itself is not genetic. It's just the umbrella of symptoms. Just like IBS, it's not necessarily genetic. It's just a umbrella of symptoms. Okay. And the risk factors, so we're covering the Western medicine understanding. So the risk factors, number one risk factor, they say, is age. Other risk factors, smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes, lack of exercise, alcohol, you know, all the big ones, cholesterol. And one of the main reasons, if you look at it, smoking, high blood pressure, diabetes, and lack of physical exercise, a lot of that has to do with putting stress and strain on the circulatory system, right? High blood pressure, the vessels are under pressure, right? Smoking kind of blocks the vessels. Lack of physical exercise, there's no activity, there's no blood flow properly through the vessels. Diabetes erodes the vessels. So you can see there's a link there, is that it's to do with the circulation, I think. A lot of it's to do with the health of your vessel system and the distribution of your blood, and then how that plays into your brain. So once the distribution of circulation goes down with aging, everything starts going down, right? You can't nourish the brain, you can't nourish the organs. So then everything falls apart, like atrophy, basically. So with dementia, there's no actual cure, right? There's medications that you can use which reduce symptoms, but they can cause complications in themselves. They come with warnings. There's environmental and behavioral things you can do, which means basically the person who's struggling, you keep them in familiar environments. You work with routines. You have photos up again on the wall and stuff like that, so that people, it kind of helps them, orientates them. Right. Sorry, just checking. Okay, sorry, back. So learning, staying active. So, staying active, staying physically active, staying mentally active is also going to help, stimulate the system. And there's often association with depression, anxiety, even psychosis. So there's a mental component to it. It's very common for people with depression to move into dementia. It's kind of an early warning, warning sign. And we'll talk about in Chinese medicine why that is, right? I need to go to slide. There we go. So people with dementia often have, mental instability. They get depressed, they get anxious. And so then there's more medications for that, right? So we put more medications in, which causes more complications. And we'll talk about why that is. It can be helpful, but it's also not the best thing. We need to understand other options as well. So what's Alzheimer's? Alzheimer's is a disease, and I'm going to simplify it. If you want to look at the more complicated explanation, there's plenty of stuff online if you look it up. But basically, it's like a type of protein or a type of byproduct that gets built up in the brain. So it doesn't kind of get cleaned out of the brain like it used to when we're younger. And so it accumulates. And then as that protein accumulates, it eventually turns into a kind of plaque. And that plaque is what disrupts the neural network and all those things, right? So about 60 to 80% of dementia cases is due to Alzheimer's disease, which is the protein that builds up and then the plaque in the brain. So again, I think it has another link to the circulatory process, right? The ability of the body to clean itself, the ability of the body to move blood and qi. So the risk factors for Alzheimer's is slightly different, but very similar, right? Age is number one. We've got high blood pressure, we've got diabetes. The genes play a factor in this, but it's very low. It's like essentially less than 5% of Alzheimer's is due to genes. And it's just a risk factor. It doesn't mean, like if your mother or father has Alzheimer's, it just increases the chances of it. It doesn't guarantee you're going to get it, right? Because there's lots of other things you can do to counterbalance the risk factors. Females in general, dementia and Alzheimer's are about twice as likely or twice as much will experience dementia than men. And I've got a theory about this, which I'll talk about later. Right, this is, yeah, it seems to be, unfortunately, that females suffer a lot more as far as a number of diseases more than men, like osteoporosis, stuff like that. So I've got a theory later on, which I'll discuss why I think that is, according to Chinese medicine, and what you can do about it as well, and how it can sort of change it. Also, as I'm saying this, I don't want it to be a belief. I don't want to scare you into this stuff, like, oh, I've got high blood pressure, I'm going to get it. There's always exceptions to the rule, and just because you maybe have a lot of risk factors isn't a guarantee. Okay. There's lots of amazing, lots of human case studies where the person was a smoker, the person drank alcohol every day, person was overweight, and they lived to 95 years old and didn't have dementia. So it's not guaranteed. These are just things to be aware of, right? So head injuries also is a major risk factor to Alzheimer's. So, being a boxer, an MMA fighter, or a rugby player, you're increasing the chances as you smack your head around, right? Down syndrome. So yeah, any condition where there's a slowness in the neural development, yeah, there's a higher risk factor, and we'll talk about more about why. So then we move to vascular dementia. So this is the last one on the Western Med. So vascular dementia, what does that mean? Vascular really means the circulatory system, cardiovascular, vascular dementia. So it's low blood flow to the brain. And this is about 20% of all dementia cases. So when we look at all the dementia cases, we've got 70% is Alzeimer's, and then the 20% is vascular. So what's that now? 78, that's 90% of all dementia. And then there's a few other little, like 1%, very small other factors. But these are the most important ones to be aware of, is Alzheimer's and vascular. Vascular, again, it's about the circulation. There's no blood flow. And to me, that sounds like that you can actually do something about it, right? Increase blood flow. How do you do that? So that's what we want to talk about. Okay. So that's the Western medical view. There's not really many treatment options. They say like, don't smoke, don't drink, exercise more, and keep yourself busy. That's kind of the treatment, or kind of the recommendations. So now let's go into Chinese med. So dementia was still experienced in the past, like thousands of years ago, and probably throughout all of human history, is that human beings have suffered from neurodegenerative illnesses. Just as we age, we degenerate mentally as well as physically. So the Chinese observe this very often. It's not unusual. But I'm not sure if dementia is increasing. I'm trying to look at the research. Like, is our modern lifestyle more prone to dementia than it was, say, 500 years ago? And I couldn't get a clear answer, but I have a feeling it is. And we'll talk about how that could be soon. So in Chinese medicine, there's really 3 causes of disease. The first one is called external pathogens. An external pathogen is like the environment is attacking your body. So, you're out in the sun for too long, right? So you get heat stroke. That's an external pathogen. You're in the cold, you're in the snow without any clothes on, right? For too long. That's an external pathogen. So it's basically where the environment invades your system because it's too strong. You haven't dealt with it. So that's external. The next one's actually excessive emotion. This definitely does not really come onto the Western medicine radar. Excessive emotion basically means that you stay in an emotion for too long. In Chinese med, they say that all emotion is natural. Anger, fear, anxiety, it's normal, right? It's normal. But what's unhealthy is that you stay in the anxiety for months, years, or you stay in the grief for years. You stay in the fear for months and years. If you stay in that emotion for too long, it causes all sorts of problems. It makes you sick. So it's the emotions, our emotional health causes sickness, physical sickness. And then the third one is lifestyle factors, which is like sleep, diet, exercise, your type of exercise, too much sex, too little sex, stuff like that. So if you look at this, the external pathogens, which can also mean like something invading a system, like a virus or something, emotions and lifestyle, about 70% of it is self-inflicted. So excessive emotions will probably contribute to over 50% of illnesses is caused by our own emotional health. And then lifestyle factors, we're not looking after ourselves, which is kind of self-inflicted. We don't sleep, we self-destructive behavior. So that's another factor. So that's what 70% of the time is kind of self-inflicted. And then external pathogens, we can't really control that one to an extent. But of course, if you're out in the snow, you put on clothes and you go near a fire, right? So you have some control over that. So I'd say generally about 70% is self-inflicted by lifestyle and emotional health. So when it comes to Chinese medicine, like what is the connection to the brain? How do the Chinese view the brain? This is very interesting and very different to Western medicine. So the brain is not a primary organ in Chinese med. The brain is like an extra organ. And the three organs that we're going to be talking about today in order and potentially of priority, the first one is kidneys, the second one is your stomach, and the third one is your heart. So these organs is what keeps the brain healthy. The brain is not isolated. It is very much involved in the organ system. And there's also this factor of stagnation. So stagnation is a big factor and a big talking point in Chinese medicine, and it causes a lot of diseases. Again, lifestyle oriented usually. Stagnation means you're not moving your physical body enough. You're not moving your emotions enough, moving through them. And you're not moving your spiritual health, or, you're not developing a spiritual relationship with the universe, they would say. So this is important to keep things moving, to keep things flowing in life. Don't stagnate for too long in one area. This is a very important part. And it comes from nature, right? Everything is changing. The seasons are changing. And just like in human life, the age is changing, right? There's different parts of your life and the different priorities changing, always changing. So Chinese medicine's view of the brain is very interesting. They call it essentially the sea of marrow. And this is an important word, marrow. So marrow is like a very crucial substance. It contains the life force or the prenatal life force. In Western medicine, it's more like a spongy substance that builds red blood cells and stuff like that inside the bones. It's kind of like that in Chinese med, but definitely goes beyond that in the sense that the marrow is also the brain. And the marrow is what creates the bones. So the kidneys actually, what they call it, the house of the marrow, the house of the marrow. Then the kidneys are made of marrow, and then the spine is an extension of the marrow. And then it extends and then moves into the brain. So the brain is the sea of marrow. So what this means is that the kidneys at the base start the marrow. So that's where the marrow is created, in the kidneys. And then it extends up your spine and into your brain. So it's all one system. The kidneys, the spine, and the brain is one system. So the good news about that is that you can nourish the health of your brain by going through your kidneys and through your spine. Right? It's one system. And I thought that was very weird when I first heard that. And I thought it was very interesting. But it makes a lot of sense. And if the yogis and stuff out there, it makes sense. Like your spine, and from the base of your spine all the way up through your spine to the top of your head, that is the fundamental substance that'll keep you vital. And it's the same in the yogas, the chakra system, the spine, it's essential. So we'll talk a lot more about this because the kidneys are essentially the most important system when it comes to the brain. So I found this quote from the Nanjing. The Nanjing is one of the classics of Chinese medicine written around Jesus' time, so the 1st century. And in this book, it says, in the sea of marrow, which is the brain, if the sea of marrow is abundant, vitality is, if the sea of marrow is abundant, the vitality is good, the body feels light and agile, and the span of life will be long. If it is deficient, there will be dizziness, tinnitus, blurred vision, fatigue, and a great desire to lie down. Right. So this is essentially saying this is the sign of aging. And when you run deficient in marrow, these are the signs and symptoms. The good news is that you can build your marrow. You can look after your marrow so that you can feel good, feel light, and live long. Move my head out this side. So I'm going to go more into the kidneys. Do you have any questions so far about this? Good. Okay, so the kidneys, like I mentioned before, they're the source, call them the primary source of yin and yang. And it's situated at the base of the spine. And the yin and the yang, or the primary source of yin and yang, is what you receive from your parents. It's called prenatal Jing, or prenatal energy. So the best of your mother, the best of your father come together to create a new life. And inside that new life, you are encoded with a prenatal amount of energy, a certain amount of energy. And that is called your Jing, your Jing Qi. It's a very important term in Chinese med. Basically, when you run out of this stuff, you die. When you run out of Jing, you die. There's ways that you can boost your Jing. And you can actually, if you're born with a weak Jing, you can still turn yourself into a powerhouse. That's the good news. For example, there's many stories. I think Bruce Lee, he was born very weak child, and he had a lot of like lung problems. He couldn't breathe properly, and they lived in this little terrible little house in Hong Kong with like lots of people and had no medicine. They were poor. So he was very weak, and he was probably going to die at a young age. But his father took him to a local martial arts master because his father knew, oh, he needs to strengthen his Jing. He needs training. So he gave him to this master, and this master basically started training him, and then Bruce Lee got addicted to it. And Bruce Lee became like the fittest, fastest man on the planet for a while until he died at 33. But that was not because of Jing. That was because of complications, and they were treating him with weird medicine, stuff like that. And he was overworking. He was working a lot, apparently, and he overdid it. So that's just one example. You can so if you've been born with a weak Jing, you can turn yourself into a powerhouse still. It does take a bit of work though, I'd say. Like, it's not easy. If a person's born with good Jing, they're pretty lucky. They're very lucky. These people that are naturally fit, their structure, their skeletal structure is really well defined. They're always strong, and they don't even like work out or do anything, and they still look really good. And they're usually, if your Jing is good too, you've got a really good brain. Like, means you're really cognitive. And so, yeah, it means if their body is strong and their mind is good, and they don't even try, that's good Jing. That's good Jing. So this energy also governs your sexual organs. It governs fertility. So if people have difficulty getting pregnant, it's usually because of the Jing. Stress in the system. There's a big fertility crisis at the moment, lack of fertility. And that's our lifestyle is harming the Jing. It's also charisma, confidence, which is part of sexual energy, I think, if someone's naturally charismatic, it's attractive, right? So then that's part of the Jing. It's part of the fertility process. The spine health, the posture, right? Their posture's good, it's more charismatic. Willpower, determination, and long-term memory. So long-term memory is in the kidneys. Short-term memory is in the stomach and spleen. It's different. So yeah, very important to have good Jing, right? Very important to have good kidneys. It's also the source. So if it's a source of yin and yang, it's also collecting energy from the universe. So it's not just your own energy, but you've also got a source of energy coming into you, into your spine, and that would be the universal force or the universal grid, and that feeds into your kidneys and up your spine. So these are all factors. So like I mentioned, so once the kidneys are good in the base of your spine, then the natural flow is that the kidney juice flows up the spine, just like the arrows in this. It flows up the spine, feeds the brain, and basically that's the system. So it circulates like that, up over the spine, down the front, up over the spine, down the front. And it even creates like a bubble of energy around you, if you like, when it's healthy. So signs of weak Jing. So these are good things to be aware of. So hair is connected to Jing. If the hair, falls out, goes grey early, it gets really brittle, that's potentially a sign of the Jing getting low. The teeth start deteriorating quite quickly. The hearing goes, the bones start going, the knees go, fertility goes, dizziness, lower back pain, and stiff spine. So they're all not very pleasant things, but these are good things to be aware of. And it's natural as well. So it's okay to experience these things, but we just want to nourish them and look after them. And we'll talk about how you can do that. Now, one thing I will point out is that things that drain your Jing is very modern Western culture, lots of things. I don't want to be anti prescription drugs, but prescription drugs do drain the Jing. That's how they work. And it's basically all drugs do that, like from marijuana to cocaine to whatever it is. Coffee does it, is that when you put that stuff in, where do you think the energy is coming from? It's not really the substance that gives you energy. It just triggers a chemical change in your system so that your system now takes the energy from your Jing, shoots it up the spine, and then gives you power, right? So cocaine gives you power, but where does it come from? It comes from the Jing. It's just releasing Jing early. I think antidepressants and most of the pharmaceuticals, where they just trigger the system to release some Jing. And pharmaceuticals are very well known for leaching like things out of the bones. Essential minerals get pulled out of the bones. Coffee does it too, it pulls it out of the bones. Alcohol does it all, it's very bad at pulling, it leaches the bones. So it leaches the Jing. So yeah, so what do you do about that? So it's okay to do those things. It's okay to take pharmaceuticals, of course, if you really need them. If you really need pharmaceuticals, it's totally fine, do it. But if you don't really need those things, I would see your doctor and see if you can deprescribe, if that's a word. You want to get off them as much as you can because they are leaching your Jing. But of course, speak to your doctor about this. Don't take my word for it. Don't do it on your own. But there's a definite overprescription culture where everything is prescription, and basically we're just pulling the Jing out. We're just leaching our fertility and these things. So, and the other thing is you can supplement it. So if you're taking the drugs or whatever, something that's leaching, and you need to do it, that's fine. You can supplement it with Chinese herbs and Qigong. Or, just some other lifestyle practice where you're replenishing the Jing that is potentially being taxed by the substance. That's a very intelligent way. You're mixing the best of everything you've got. And that's what I always recommend people is complement, both do East and Western medicine at the same time. Because one is replenishing the other. And sometimes you need Western med, it's fine. So yes, I could talk about that forever, but I just wanted to get that out. So the psychological effects of having low Jing or having low kidneys is that the person starts to lose courage. They become very fearful of the world, fearful of everything. Like, I think doubt is a big one. So they want to launch a business, but they don't, they're afraid. They want to publish something, they don't, they're afraid. Like, they have a goal, they have an inspiration, but then when they go into action, they get afraid and they stop doing what they want to do. So that's losing courage, right? Being criticized, people not liking you, all those things. That's like you're losing courage. Just go for it, right? You lose willpower. That's a big one. So willpower is the follow through. Just do it. Who cares? And willpower also means your ability to weather uncomfortable feelings. So going to the gym and exercising is uncomfortable, right? You're sweating, or it doesn't feel great. You're panting, right? It's hard work. It doesn't feel good. Your mind is constantly saying, stop. But when you go, no, I'm going to keep going. This is good for me. This feels good. I'm going to feel great later. You're actually developing willpower when you deal with uncomfortableness. When you persist in uncomfortable situations, you build willpower. And that's also, they call it psychological flexibility, I think, in some psychological science. And resilience, psychological resilience is another part of willpower. And the instant gratification sort of culture that we've got now, something doesn't feel good, stop it, do something else, or, you know, the inability to weather hot weather, to be sunburnt, to be cold, to be hot, like the inability to deal with that is a sign of low resilience. So resilience is really good. Training is good. That's why I think, especially when you're younger and stuff, is to put yourself in challenging situations. You know, get rid of all those things. Like, you know, you can go to an ashram or join the army, or, you know, do something, martial arts, like do something that's very challenging, but builds resilience for later on. Yeah. So you lose determination, you lose backbone. You know, there's a common saying, he's got no backbone. That's where it comes from. Like, everyone just walks over you. You don't stand up for anything. You don't pursue anything. And then you lose libido, you lose sexual energy. It can also go the other way, where you're almost too excessive to try and make up for no backbone or whatever, right? So the sexual energy is very much disrupted. Any questions about that? Because I'll move on to the stomach now. Oh, there we go. Cool. So the next organ, so we've got the kidneys, right? So that is the fundamental to your brain. The healthier your kidneys are, the healthier your brain is. That's the basic equation. The next one is the stomach and spleen, because the stomach and spleen is what we call the postnatal Jing, or the postnatal energy. So when you're born, it's prenatal. And then when you're in, you know, you've got your body now. So now, where do you get your energy from? Or where do you get your Jing from now? You get it from your stomach and spleen. Okay? Because you eat the food turns into Jing and Qi and blood. So if your stomach is good, you can feed your kidneys with Jing. And that's how you can reverse it or make your Jing more powerful. Of course, your lungs are a part of it as well, like your breathing creates energy. But generally, 60% of your energy probably comes from food. So that's why the stomach and spleen is the next in line.